We continue now at the top of Daf Dalet Amud Beis Meseches Sukkah. This is Sukkah Daf 4b. The Gemara here is talking about a case. Let's say you have a situation of a sukkah that is less than 10 tefachim high. It's too small, so you dig out a hole in the middle of the sukkah. So if from the edges of the hole to the walls is pachos mishlosha tefachim, if it's less than 3 tefachim, then kasher it's going to be kosher. Rashi over here says pachos mishlosha kalavud. That's what we call the halacha of lavud, that when there's a space, when there's a gap of less than 3 tefachim, you can connect those two areas. Halacha l'Moshe misinai. That's considered a halacha l'Moshe misinai. It's as if you dug the hole all the way to the wall. It's as if it is large enough, the entire sukkah all the way to the wall, even though you only dug the hole in the middle. So the Gemara asks, now what's the difference in a situation where you build a platform for a sukkah that's too high? So then we said as long as it's less than 4 amos from the edge of the platform to the wall, you apply dofen akuma and it's kosher. What's the difference over here in this case by the situation where it's too small and you're digging a hole? It seems to be the exact same case, just the opposite formulation. Where you're saying it has to be less than 3 tefachim. Why not give the guy all the way up to 4 amos? And so the Gemara answers, Hasam di'ise ladofen, over there, where what you have is, as Rashi says, a shem dofen. That which you have is actually called a wall. It's a very high wall, but it's called a wall. So pachos me'arba amos, as long as it's less than 4 amos, that's going to be enough. And you can apply the principle of dofen akuma, bend the wall, so that we consider the ceiling from the edge of the platform, that ceiling area all the way to the wall, we'll consider it all part of the wall. But the Gemara says, hacha, over here in this case where the sukkah is very small and you're digging a hole in the middle of the sukkah, so l'shavuye dofen, you're trying to create a dofen. This wall over here really isn't a wall. It's not even 10 tefachim high. You're trying to turn the wall into a kosher wall. So then pachos mishlosha tefachim in. If the edge of the pit that you're digging in the middle of the sukkah is less than 3 tefachim from the wall, then you can say it merges, the hole merges together with the wall and creates the wall, ilo. But if not, then it's not going to be good. And as Rashi over here says, hasam di'ise l'dofen pachos me'arbamos, hasam dika shem dofen olav. Over there, the wall is called a wall. T'chol dofen sheno pachos miyud shmo dofen. Any wall that is not less than 10 tefachim is called a wall. So va'afilo gavo ad l'rakivin, if it's very high. Hilkach ad arba amos chaser mashu. Therefore, as long as you have a distance of less than 4 amos from the edge of the platform to the wall, so agmer rachman l'moshe dofen akuma. You have this halacha l'Moshe misinai of dofen akuma, and the entire wall and the ceiling all combined to be a curved wall. But hacha pachos miyud ain't shem dofen olav. Here, you don't have a shem dofen. It's not really called a wall if it's less than 10 tefachim. You're trying to create it, turn it into a wall. The rule is dofen akuma. This is not a dofen, so you can't apply dofen akuma. Therefore, the only principle that you can use, that you can utilize, is going to be the principle of lavud, of less than 3 tefachim. Who shaper dummy, then it's going to be okay. Lo, and if not, it's going to be a problem. And the Gemara continues, let's say you have a situation again of a sukkah that the schach is too high, it's more than 20 amos high. And this time you build a column in the middle of the sukkah, and the column itself is 10 tefachim high. And there's also on top of the column, you have enough space for the minimum size of a sukkah. You have 7 by 7 and a little bit more. You have enough space for a sukkah on top of that column. So Savar Abaye Lememar Gud Asik Mechitzasa. In this case, Abaye thought to say the concept of Gud Asik, raise the walls, meaning this column has walls along the outside of it, and you can halachically imagine that those walls are extending up all the way to the schach, and so you could sit on top of the column, and it's as if you're surrounded by walls. As Rashi over here says, take those outer walls of the pillar of the column, saviv that's surrounded, and then you imagine them going up all around. They're 10 tefachim high. You have a sukkah. You use the principle of called Gud Asik, raise the walls. And of course, the schach on top is not more than 20 amos from the top of the column. So therefore, Abaye thought that it would be good. Amar le Rav said back to Abaye, it's not good. But inon mechitzas hanikaros v'leka. When you want to apply this principle of Garasik mechitzasa, you need what's called mechitzas hanikaros, meaning when you're on top of the column, you would need to actually be able to see the walls coming up. Here, you can't see any walls actually coming up around you that you are then extending upward. Here, the walls are, so to speak, from the perspective of the person sitting on top of the column, those walls are hidden. They're just the outer parts of the column, and you don't apply Garasik mechitzasa in such a case. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, no, it's arba kundisin. Let's say a person takes 4 posts or four poles, v'sigech al gabon, and he puts schach on the top of them. Rabbi Yaakov machshir. Rabbi Yaakov says in such a situation it's going to be kosher. The Chachamim poslan, and the Chachamim say it's possible. Rashi will explain all of this. So in any case, it's a machlokas here, Rabbi Yaakov and the Chachamim. Amar Ravuna, and Ravuna explains, machlokas al sfas hagag. These poles, the whole machlokas here, Rabbi Yaakov and the Chachamim, is when the poles are situated at the edge of the roof. So you have the roof of a house, and then you have these poles on the top of the house at all 4 corners, and you put schach on top. That's a machlokas. The Rabbi Yaakov savar amrin and godasik mechitza. So Rabbi Yaakov says you take the walls of the house and you imagine them going upward. You raise those walls, and now you have a situation where those walls, it's as if you have 4 walls and schach on top. But Rabbanan savar, the Rabbanan say lo amrin and godasik mechitza. So we don't say godasik mechitza. Avol be'emtza hagag. But let's say you put the poles in the middle of the roof. So divrei hakol psula, then everybody would agree it's going to be possible. So Rashi over here says, machlokas al svas hagag. The machlokas is when the poles, they're at the edge, at the corners of the roof. The mechitzas habayis tachteho, the walls of the actual house beneath, keneged bein hakundasin, which are between the various posts. V'ikol amemer godasik. You can say godasik. In this case, where you have a situation of a house, walls of a house, and you have 4 posts on top of the roof, that there you don't need mechitzas nikaros. It's going to be good. Again, it's going to be good according to the position of Rabbi Yaakov. Avol be'emtza hagag, but let's say you put the poles in the middle of the roof. She'ein tachteh mechitzas. You don't have right beneath the poles actual walls, saviv that surround. Divrei hakol psula, then everyone agrees it's possible. V'lo dayeh be'arbas hakundasin lios lo shem daled mechitzas. The 4 poles cannot count as 4 walls. That again, that is the opinion of Rav Huna in explaining this machlokas tanoim. But the Gemara continues, Rav Nachman says, no, be'emtza hagag machlokas. The machlokas between Rav Yaakov and the Chacham actually is be'emtza hagag. Rashi over here says, Rav Nachman Amar be'emtza hagag machlokas v'al yedei hakundisin. It's through these posts, through these poles, Rabbi Yaakov machshir, that Rabbi Yaakov says those count as walls. Ukagon shein rochav tefach l'chol tzidayin. Situation is that these posts are 1 tefach wide on every side. Dika shem mechitzos tefach mitzafim l'dorim, v'shem mechitzos tefach mimizrach l'mayr b'chol achas v'achas. You have an actual mechitz, as long as it's a tefach, it's called a mechitz in each side of the sukkah. Kidel kamon, as we'll say later. Rabbanan savri lo miskashru ela b'shtei mechitzos kilchosan. But the Rabbanan say you can't rely on these tefach walls on every corner. You have to have at least 2 walls that are kilchosan. What's kilchosan? Kashir Mesechet Sukkah. They have to be at least the size of the minimum size of a sukkah. Uv'shlishas afilu tefach. On the 3rd wall, there you can rely on a tefach, but you can't rely on a tefach every single time. That's how Rav Nachman understands the machlokas between Rabbi Yaakov and the Chachamim. And so now the Gemara says, what exactly the second approach here, the second approach of Rav Nachman, what exactly does it mean? So the Gemara makes an inference, or the Gemara asks as follows. Ibailu, they ask the following question. Be'emza hagag machlokas. Is Rav Nachman saying the machlokas is in the middle of the roof? Avol asvas hagag divrei hakol ksheira. But if the poles would be at the corners of the roof, then everyone would agree kosher? Odilmor, maybe what he's saying is as follows. Vein bazu machlokas. He's saying, of course I agree there's a machlokas if it's in the corners, but I also say there's a machlokas in the middle. And to that the Gemara says, Teku, we'll leave that as a question. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, they ask the following question from a Braisa. No, it's daled kondisin ba'aretz. The case is as follows. Let's say a person took 4 posts and he planted them in the ground. V'sikech al gab, and he puts chach on top. Rabbi Yaakov machshev chachamim poslim. It says over here, Rabbi Yaakov says kosher, say machlokas, and the chachamim say pasul. But here you don't have any house to rely on for godasik. Va'aretz techemtza hagagdami. When you're planting them in the ground, when you're putting them in the ground, that's like no different than putting it in the middle of the roof. There's no opportunity to say godasik. V'kam machshev Rabbi Yaakov, and you see Rabbi Yaakov does say kosher. So the Gemara says, to Yufta, the Rav Huna, to Yufta, this is indeed a refutation of Rav Huna, because Rav Huna said that there is no machlokas. That's what Rav Huna said. He said, Be'emtza hagag, everyone says pasul. Here, clearly, Rabbi Yaakov is saying kosher. The Gemara tries to make another inference. V'yod be'emtza hagag, be'emtza hu depligi. Also, it seems like they're arguing only in the middle of the roof. Aval al svas hagag, divrei hakol ksheira. Sounds like on the corners of the roof, everyone would say kosher. And Rav Huna said on the corners of the roof, that's the machlokas. So leima to have a tiyufta de Rav Huna betarti. Let's say it's a double refutation of Rav Huna because it shows that they're not arguing on the corners, that everybody agrees kosher on the corners. The Gemara says not necessarily. Amar lach Rav Huna. Rav Huna can respond to you. Pligi be'emtza hagag. There's a machlokas in the middle of the roof. V'hu adin al svas hagag. They'd have the same exact machlokas on the corners of the roof. The reason why they're arguing on a case where it's in the middle of the roof, lo diacha kochad Rav Yaakov, that's to teach you the strength of Rav Yaakov's position. Te'afilu be'emsa hagag nami machsha, that he says even in the middle of the roof, it's kosher. We're trying to teach you that chiddush, but it could very well be they argue in both cases. And the Gemara continues along the same lines. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, no atzarbo kundisin ba'aretz. Same case, you have 4 posts that you put into the ground. The sikech al gaban, you put tzchach on top of it. Rabbi Yaakov says, when we look at these posts and we say, kol she'ilu yechkaku v'yechelku, if you could, in theory, carve out these posts into like an L shape. V'yeshban tefach lekan, v'tefach lekan, there's going to be a tefach, each one in every direction. So then nidon and mishum diyumud, that's called what we call diyumud. Diyumdin are when you have these kind of posts that are all L-shaped in each corner. And then we say that they're considered walls. A tefach in every direction is going to be considered a wall, and it's as if you have 4 walls. V'imlav, and if not, ein nidon and mishum diyumud, you can't apply this halacha of diyumud, and it's going to be a problem. Shahaya Rabbi Yaakov Omer, because Rabbi Yaakov says diyumde sukkah tefach. As long as you have diyumdim in the sukkah of 1 tefach each, so then you can say that you have 4 kosher walls. The Chachamim say, ad shiu shtayim kil chasan, u'shlishas afilu tefach. No, you have to have 2 walls, kil chasan, at least the sheer, minimum sheer of a sukkah. The third wall, that can be just a tefach. We'll take a look at Rashi over here. Nidon mishum diyumid. It has a halach of diyumid. Atadonu lahachshir kedin shamru chachamim linyan pasei biros. This is the same as the halacha of pasei biros. This was a leniency they had in Meseches Erevin, that they allowed people who were traveling, they could use the wells on Shabbos, create an Erev around the well by having these L-shaped walls, and that would allow them to take the water out of the well. It would be considered going from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid. Be'erevin, that's a leniency in Erevin. Shanitarn ba'arba diyumdin v'al-shem sheyesh l'kol echad shtei mechitzas karlu diyumdin. They're called diyumdin because each L shape has really 2 walls. Diyo amudin means 2 amudin, shnei amudin. The word diyo is like shnei. Shaya Rabbi Yaakov Omer diyumdei sukkah dayu b'tefach. Rabbi Yaakov said when it comes to the diyumdin of sukkah, the walls just need to be a tefach. V'lo kashel pasei biros she'tzrichim amulakan v'amulakan. By pasei biros, by erevin, you actually need an amma. Each diyumid, each wall of the diyumid needs to be an amma. Here it only needs to be a tefach. Now, Rashi also points out, when Rabbi Yaakov says you carve out this post into an L shape, it's actually a round post. If we'd be talking about a square post, you could just say yechleku, that's how it says in Erevin. You wouldn't have to say the yechleku v'yachleku, that you got to carve out and make it smooth, make it like a wall. It would just be yechleku. There would be no need for this halacha of yechleku if it would be in a square shape. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots, quoting the Mishnah, v'she'ena gavo asar tvachim. If you have a sukkah that is not 10 tvachim high, that is not going to be kosher. The minimum size of a sukkah is 10 tvachim. Gemara says, Menolan, from where we know this? Gemara says, Itmar, it was taught, Rav, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chaviva, Masnu, Rav and Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chaviva, they taught as follows. And the Gemara makes a parenthetical comment, Bechula Seder Moed, in all of Seder Moed, Kolki Haizug, anytime you have this pair that's mentioned, Chilufe Rabbi Yochanan and Ma'ili Rabbi Yonasan. So some, they take out Rabbi Yochanan, and they put in Rabbi Yonasan. Rashi over here says, Rav, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chaviva, Masnu, Lahach Milsad Lakaman, they're going to teach this thing later. Bechula Seder Moed, Kolechad Amrin Haizuga Ki Adadi B'Shmaita, Ika Amoroi de Mechalfi, Rabbi Yochanan, U'Ma'ili Rabbi Yonasan. Anytime you have this pair of Amoraim mentioned, some people, some of the Amoraim take out Rabbi Yochanan, and instead they put in Rabbi Yonasan. But in any case, what do they say? They say as follows. Aron Tisha, we know that the Aron was 9 tvachim high. This is the Aron in the Kodesh Kodashim. The Chaporas Tefach, and the Kaporas, which sat above the Aron, that had a thickness of a Tefach. Harei Kana Sara, that comes out to 10 tvachim. Uchsiv in the Pasuk also says, V'noarti l'chasham, v'dibarti itchem ala Kaporas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shechina comes down, and I will speak with you from on top of this Kaporas. Again, the Kaporas, which is on top, which sits on top of the Aron. Rashi over here says, Aron Tisha Govo, the Aron, how do we know that it was 9 tvachim high? Tichsiv v'ama v'chetzi komoso. It says that it was 1.5 amos. V'ama bas shisha tvachim. We're talking about an amma that is 6 tvachim. So 1.5 amos is going to come out to 9 tvachim high. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Hey Amud Aleph.